Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
When you're young, you just give up so fast because you think it's the hardest thing you've ever experienced. It is the hardest thing you've ever experienced in your life, but that's just the beginning of how hard life is. But you have to understand that life does get better. And if we didn't experience hard times, we would never really be able to cherish how great it is when things are really good.
Are you a teen or adult looking for more happiness in every day and ways to connect with people in your life?
You've come to the right place. Hack Your Happiness is a podcast designed to bring you the behind the scenes of what brings iconic individuals happiness, plus their life hacks.
I'm Mercedes.
And I'm Anastasia.
And we're the two teens behind Small Bits of Happiness.
We're interviewing Olympic athletes, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and more.
Throughout all of our episodes, you'll find great conversations, hacks that you can take away and try in your life, inspiration, as well as unique and surprising insights. Today, we're speaking with Hazen Audel. Hazen Audel is a television personality, biologist, adventurer, survival instructor, and wilderness guide who has lived with tribal people all over the world, using their ancient techniques to hunt for food, make tools, build shelters, and survive the unforgiving landscape along with lethal predators.
He is the host of National Geographic's Ultimate Survival World War II, Survive the Tribe, and Primal Survivor. We are so excited to be speaking with Hazen today, as we've been watching his show and loving each and every episode, plus learning so much for years. Hazen is going to be sharing with us his biggest learnings from all these expeditions, hacks to facing fears, and more.
Welcome, Hazen!
Hello. So good to be here with you guys.
Yes, we are just so thrilled to be speaking with you today. You are an iconic explorer, TV personality, and educator. But take us back to the beginning. How did your journey to exploring and being on television begin?
I have been fascinated with nature my entire life. My very first memories were just being fascinated with bugs and catching bugs and putting them in jars and looking under bricks and rocks for more of them. And I guess I just never grew out of that. And so I kind of envisioned myself being a biologist or studying what I love. And I'm the first person sort of in my lineage to have gone to college. So I think it was kind of unfamiliar territory, but I got thrown into the river as far as that goes. And I went there and nobody really kind of knew what college was going to be like. And I thought it was going to be awesome. I was going to be learning about all the names of all the snakes and learning more about the kind of plants that I loved. But when you get into biology, you got to do you got to go through the ropes of learning all the kind of boring stuff to some people, like the carbohydrate chain and the Krebs cycle and all that sort of stuff. And I guess I wasn't learning about the kind of animals specifically that I wanted to learn about. So I took a break from school. I was 19, so it was still my first year of college. And I knew that if I was going to continue through college, probably to be a biologist requires almost 10 years of school when you go through like the first 4 years of normal stuff and then your master's and then your PhD. It's a long time, a long journey. So I figured, well, I better know exactly that this is the plan. So I went to South America. Because that's the pinnacle of biodiversity. If you know about nature, that's like the more species of plants and trees and snakes and tropical freshwater fish than anywhere else in the world. Everything and insects and everything. So at that time, I was mowing lawns. I'd been mowing lawns since high school. And I had enough money in my tea kettle where I kept all my cash. I remember it was $680 for a plane ticket from Spokane, Washington to Quito, Ecuador. And I studied Spanish when I was in high school because I knew that, again, I wanted South America to be a big part of my life, but I wasn't very good. I wasn't a super strong student, and I really couldn't speak Spanish at all. So I was pretty shy. I kind of figured I had laser-like focus. I had my blinders on. I thought I was going to go to the jungle and just be surrounded by bugs, and that's all I wanted to do, and those are the only people I wanted to talk to. But so my plan was I had all my camping equipment from high school because I used to camp and hike and do all that sort of stuff a lot. So I brought that with me, my sleeping bag, my tent, my stove. And I thought that I would just get to Quito, Ecuador, which is the capital. It's 10,000 feet elevation. There isn't any jungle there. So it took a 2-day bus ride to go from Quito to the very end of the road. I told the bus driver and the bus station, take me to as far as anything with tires can take me. I want to go to that very end of the road. And they said, nobody wants to go there. That's not where you want to go. I said, no, really, that's where I want to go. That's probably where the most pristine jungle is. So, it's 2 days in a bus, and there's lots of stories to be told from that. But it was basically more and more people got off until it was just me and about 5 other people that were still on the bus, and they were indigenous people, and they were, rather than luggage, they were carrying things like sacks of their crops, and they had chickens in baskets and stuff like that. And I got off and kind of was, again, really shy and scared. So I found a little place to go hide in the bushes and set camp for that night. And then I woke up in the morning, and it was just the sound of all of the insects and the crickets and the frogs was just piercing that night, just nonstop. And then in the morning, you start to get birds. And I looked out my tent, and there was this mist over the jungle, and it was just swarming with life. And I had this special feeling just inside of me that I said, this is exactly where I was meant to be. And that next day, I kind of collected my things and went further up this river, because the road couldn't cross this one river. And I went way up the river, found a cool place that I thought I could just hang out and go camping for a while, because the only money that I had left over after that $680 plane ticket was $78 of just cash. And I figured somewhere along the lines, I'll buy some rice, and you can, for $78, you can buy a lot of rice. And at that time, all through high school, I was really interested in tropical fish, freshwater tropical fish. So I had aquariums and everything in my room. I even had to move my room from the upstairs to down in the basement, because my aquariums were so heavy that the weight of all the water and stuff was starting to cave in the floors. So I had to move down to the basement with all of my aquariums. I was going to be a freshwater ichthyologist, so a study of fish. So what I wanted to do was go to the jungle, eat rice, and then I could go fish in the rivers and then have fish and rice. And when I'd run out of rice, that meant I ran out of money and I'd have to go home. I figured that I'd be traveling and exploring the jungle for about 3 or 4 weeks or a month and a half, maybe. But what had happened was that as I was fishing on this one river, the river's really enormous and probably, a good 100 feet wide. And I could see 100 feet on the other side of the river, there were these kids that were fishing, and they were probably, I would say, probably 9 to 12 years old, 3 of them. And they were always fishing together. And when they were catching their fish, they were just reeling in all these fish. And it was so far away, I couldn't see what species of fish they were. I didn't know what they were fishing with. And they were obviously way better fishermen than I was. And I was really curious to what their secrets were. But again, I was too shy. They were definitely local kids, like indigenous of some kind. But they saw me across the river trying to fish. And every couple days or so, they would come to the other side of the river, and there was no roads there. So now it was just a trail alongside the river. And I could see their footprints and footsteps that they were going up and down the river, because it was really muddy. And one day I caught them as they were walking up, and they had a basket and bucket full of fish. And I just had to stop and said, what kind of fish, with the best of my broken Spanish. And they kind of knew that I wanted to look at their fish. So they showed me, and I saw all these fish that I had only seen in my aquarium books and stuff like that. I was fascinated. And then just over the next couple of days, they were really interested in me and why there was this guy camping under a bunch of shrubs. And pretty soon they kind of invited me to go fishing with them, and I saw what they were fishing, and I was catching more fish. And then I think just they told their parents that there's this weird kind of white kid living in a tent that's rotting away in the shrubs. And their parents invited me. They said, well, you should, next time you see him, invite him over for dinner. They caught me one day and they said, come over to our house, and my parents want to meet you. And I was like, okay. So we hiked up to their house, and it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like it. They lived in a house that was, they cut down palm trees, palm wood, and they put those in the ground. And then their house, the floor was about 5, I guess in Canadian, it'd be 2 meters above the ground. And they keep everything up above the ground because it's so wet. Anything that touches the ground rots. And there's also so many snakes and bugs and animals and stuff down below. And so I went there, and their house the floor was made out of crushed bamboo. You take round bamboo and you crush it. And then that was the floor that they walked on. There wasn't any walls, and they just had a roof that was all thatched of palm leaves. And then they had the fire was going in the middle of the floor. They had they made a box full of sand, and then they had just kind of a fire there, and then the smoke just went up into the roof. And they were cooking some fish. And then I was looking at all, and I didn't know the language very well. I was just taking it all in. I'd never seen anything like it before. And then the father comes in, and he had a pig that he had just hunted from the forest, and it was dead, of course. And they tied the front legs to the back legs, and he was wearing it like a backpack. It was a piggyback, right? It was his backpack. So he came in, and he got up into the house, and he laid it on the floor. And then the mother just got a knife and started gutting it and taking the skin of it off, and then putting all the meat on the fire. And I'm just taking it all in. And that night we had fish, and we had some local other things that they found from the jungle, and wild pig for dinner. And I got a chance to practice my Spanish, which was horrible. And they're not very good at speaking Spanish, I actually come to find out, because they're indigenous. They speak a language called Quichua. But there is an expression, a Hispanic Latin expression, and they would say, mi casa es su casa, which means my house is your house. It's an expression that means once you spend time with us and we know who you are, we know that you're a good person, you're always welcome. You're an extension of our family now. And they could just tell that I was there because I was really fascinated with nature, and I was good with their kids, and I think I was kind. And yeah, they basically said, you love this place. We can tell that you love all these animals and everything, but you're living in a tent that's rotting away. And why don't you just come live with us? They're probably thinking you should come live with us so you don't die out there. And so then I took up the offer and made a little, they just sleep on the floor pretty much. And I did the same thing. I had a blanket, and then after a few days of hanging out with them, it was almost like they were my host parents. And that was the first time, I had ever seen where everything that they had was just from the jungle. But they knew that I was really interested in snakes and bugs, and the father and the kids would say, hey, if you want to see this kind of snake, I know exactly where to find it. We can go look for it tomorrow. And so that was my dream. And I would go out with the kids that were fishing, and sometimes I'd go and whatever, they had chores or something where they'd have to go into the jungle to go look for certain things. And I'd just follow them. As they were looking for stuff, they would be grabbing different leaves and putting them in their pocket, or they had a basket, backpacks and stuff, and they'd be carrying stuff around. And I was wondering, well, what are you guys getting? What is that? What is that leaf? And they was like, medicina. And they were collecting different kinds of plants that were medicines from the forest. I said, wow, you know the names of all these plants? They're like, yeah. I was like, well, then if you know so much, like, I want to learn, tell me what you know. And then you're talking about a jungle where there's hundreds and thousands, there's thousands of different kinds of plants. And they were naming every single plant down the trail. It took them about 10 minutes to get down 10 feet down the trail because they were saying every single plant. And they were saying things like, this plant is Yerba Luisa. It's what we use when we get a skin fungus during the wet season on our in between our toes and on our feet. And this is the only plant that cures it. And then my mom uses this for when she gets really bad stomach cramps. And then my grandpa uses this for his cataracts, this one. And then this other plant that they're talking about, and they knew the name. And this plant is what my mom uses for when the pigs get really sick, and they use it for the pigs. And they knew so much. They knew everything. And you just follow them and just learn by just watching what they were doing. And at the same time, started kind of learning the language. And I can remember on our first hike, we walked for about 3 hours through the forest, like 3 hours going through the stuff. And then all of a sudden they found this one tree, and the tree was about as big around as your wrist. And I still remember to this day, the name of it is called Wambulo. Like, wow, that little tree looks exactly like every single little tree in this whole jungle. What's so special about this? And they cut it with it. They were carrying machetes, they're like 7, 8 years old. They had machetes. They chopped down the tree, and they showed me that the wood was like bright pink purple, almost like the background of your room. And it was wood. And then they were saying, no, this is really super strong wood, but it floats, and this is what we use for when we're canoeing. And it's like, well, I don't know what. Anyways, they chopped down this tree. They took it, and then found out that to them, they know every single name of all these different trees. And to me, at that time, all these trees look the same. All these plants look the same. But to them, they know everything there is to know, not only the names, but the uses of all this stuff. Then we came back, and then they just carved this tree into this big long pole. And then they use that pole for when they go to school, because there's no roads. They have a dugout canoe, and then they just pull up the river, up and down the river with a special pole, and they go up to school, which was like 2 miles further down the river. That was just, like I said, I was 19 years old. I'd never seen this sort of stuff before, but I was learning from the people that I wanted to be learning from in school, really. And when I thought that I only had $78 and I was going to stay there for a couple of weeks, I wound up living with them for 8 months. And during that time, that was 8 months of living without electricity, living off of things that we were growing in our garden, living off of things that we were fishing out of the rivers, things that we were hunting, things that we were just like all the fruits and different nuts that were provided. At that time in your life, when you're going from like 16 years old to like 23, you're really trying to discover who you are, right? Like what your identity is. You're learning, and there's like dramas, and there's just different things that you're learning about. And I think that was at such a time in my life where I was gathering information about the world at such a time where now that really is part of my DNA. It's part of who I am now. So I had such an incredible, amazing, life-changing experience at 19. I remember coming back because otherwise I would have been kicked out of school. And it was crazy. It was like so much culture shock and wondering. It was like going into a store and everything was lit up with aisles and the fluorescent lights. And I'd never seen bright lights like that. It seemed like ever before. I just changed so much. And like I said, I learned 2 languages at that time. And I can remember a real important part when I came back. It was around wintertime. And when I was a kid, I was kind of a misfit, like a nerdy kid. I remember I invited one kid over to come play after school, and I think we hit it off. We had a good time. And then the next day I was like, hey, want to come over and let's hang out after school? He's like, no way, dude. You have a cactus collection. But it's just, I was a nerd, like I had all these plants and I had all these aquariums and stuff, and nobody else was like that. So I guess I was just made fun of a lot when I was a little kid. But then when I came back, and there was like people were getting together after, once they had been back from college, and there was a party and I had been invited, and there were all these kids that used to always make fun of me And it was like I had changed so much from that trip that it was like I didn't ever have the feelings of that I wanted to be like them or be invited to their parties. It was like, wow, I don't have I don't have to be like you guys anymore. I'm totally a different person now. And from then on, so that was 8 months, and then I had to go back to school. So I went back to school for that school year. And then the day it got out for summer, I was already on a plane back to Ecuador to the same place. And then I lived with those people for about the next 7 years, every summer, or maybe even a winter if I could go there, because they really became another part of my family. It was a kind of a lifestyle that I really loved. Yeah, in that time when I would come back and go back to school, I eventually finished school, and then I had so many different life experiences than everybody else that I still wanted to pursue biology. And when I was applying for like graduate school and getting my master's and stuff, all the professors and the schools recognized that when I put in my resume, I had all these life experiences that nobody else had. And so then I was getting scholarships for different schools. And then I decided I was going to go to University of Hawaii, and I went to go get my master's degree in tropical biology and ethnobotany. Ethnobotany is the study of cultural uses of their natural resources. So it's like studying medicinal plants and things like that. So yeah, I went there, uh, did my graduate studies at University of Hawaii, and then once I was there, the one thing cool about staying in school and going to college is as you go further over in years, you get more opportunities to do cool stuff. And so I was with my professors and with other of my classmates, and they were traveling. So then I started traveling and doing sort of the same nature of things in Southeast Asia and in the remote South Pacific Islands. And yeah, then it was just my lifestyle. I was always looking for ways to travel and live in really remote areas with indigenous people, the people that are from there. And yeah, I just continued to keep doing that. And then after I finished up with school, I was like, wow, I don't know if I want to continue doing all these studies in academia. I think I want to go back home, figure out. I think I had a good art business going, and I love where I have a really strong family, so I wanted to come home to what I was familiar with, and then but still stay in the sciences. So I became a science teacher. I was a biology and art teacher in high school. And then again, every summer I was doing biology research or doing travels. And at that time, then I was taking videos of my adventures because I knew that what I was seeing, they'd never seen before. And they're really good for teaching, right? Because, yeah, it's everything that I'm stoked to teach about. So my students were taking my videos that I was showing in my classrooms and they were putting them up on YouTube. And I didn't know anything about YouTube or anything, but they started to get really popular. And then um, there was people that were really interested in wildlife filmmaking saw me and my enthusiasm and my knowledge about stuff. And they invited me to go show some of my films at these film festivals. And at these film festivals it's like a big conference where the BBC and National Geographic and Animal Planet and Discovery Channel are all there. And I thought, wow, this is going to be maybe my chance to be my whole biggest dream would be not only to be a biologist, but to be like a nature show host. Like there's a guy named David Attenborough. And if you don't know who he is, you're really missing out. So that's your guys' job, is to teach them, like put up a link or something so you can see how awesome he is. But he was always my hero. And I thought I could be a nature show host, but it's kind of like everybody wants to be in a drummer in a rock and roll band, but the chances are kind of slim unless you really work hard at it. That was like for me being a nature show host, but I thought this was my chance. And there was this one production company. It's a production company that makes the same television show as River Monsters. You may have heard of that, but anyways, they heard about who I was from different stories that people were telling about me. And we set up a meeting and they said, wow, we'd love to know more about what you do? And I said, well, yeah, the things I see and the things I've experienced over the last 10 years are things that are way cooler on TV. Like I've never seen anything like it before. But I don't know how you're going to make a television show about it. And then they got really mad at that. And they said, oh yeah, really? They like took offense to it. And they said, well, next time you go down there, we'll follow you and we'll film you if these stories are true. And I thought they were just telling lies, but I went there the following April, and the owner of the company went down with a cameraman, and they followed me around for like 10 days, and we filmed a pilot, and they saw that I walked my talk and all my stories were true. And they made like a little teaser trailer sizzle thing and marketed it around, and it was National Geographic that saw what I was doing, and they thought, well, okay, let's try to make some sort of television show. And we filmed the very first episode. It was just going to be an experiment pilot. And then by the time we brought home the goods and we made a show out of it for that 1 hour, they said, yeah, let's do a season. So that would be like 6 episodes in total of all around the world. It was going to be this amazing year. And I was going to have to quit my job as a teacher. And I was really scared about doing that. But I thought, God, this is my only chance. And you really have to follow your dreams. And we did that. It was an amazing year. And then I guess National Geographic really liked it. And then here we are now on like our 9th season of making at that time it was Survive the Tribe. Now it's Primal Survivor. And we've made like 80 some shows, and I've gotten to go all over the world now. And it is my absolute total dream. It's awesome.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible story.
Oh my gosh, that is
I love
so
how
amazing.
you followed your passion and how that has truly, like, even though people give you a hard time in school, like high school, and you didn't know if you were going to get your dream, like, you kept going, you worked hard, you followed your passion, you learned everything possible, and how that brought you to your dream job and just to where you are now, which is just so inspiring and incredible. And I think something that all of us can absolutely take away and apply to our own lives is like, follow your passion. If you work hard enough at something and you're truly passionate and you're not afraid to take risks, you can really make something of it.
100%. And we love watching and following all your shows, and it sounds like being in nature, like how those indigenous people kind of saved you from rotting and almost dying. I'm sure that you've experienced so many situations where you've had to overcome fears and undergo a lot of challenging and frightening situations. What are your top 3 tips for teens to face these kinds of fears?
A lot of the fears that we have are fears that we grew up learning. So like people are scared of spiders. The only reason why we're scared of spiders is because we've been trained to be scared of spiders. If we were surrounded by people that thought, oh yeah, they're spiders, they're just part of life, and they're not going to hurt you, they really aren't going to hurt you, and they're around, you just grow up not ever having to worry about spiders. And so a lot of our fears that we have, you just have to be really aware that being scared of something is because you don't know about it usually. And so our minds are our biggest enemies. Our minds create problems. That's our subconscious. And we always have to worry about that. Like a lot of times if we're in a relationship and everything's going super good, pretty soon our minds are like, how come it's going so good? How come what? And it becomes your enemy. And you have to really fight that. So I think a big challenge is just trying to doubt the things that everybody's really scared of. But then also, hopefully you have some wisdom to also listen. And then you start to get wise about going, oh, there is an actual reason why people are scared of that, But so I guess it's just trying to be really aware. Okay, overcome fear. Well, one is knowledge, like really trying to understand the facts. And I grew up with science for one, and so science is based on facts and peer review and like a lot of intelligences coming together to make things. It's not like the kind of quote unquote facts that you can find on YouTube. That's just one weirdo saying that aliens are coming from outer space and creating weird chemicals in the air and stuff. It's not true, So really kind of surrounding yourself. I think another thing about fears and how to overcome your fears is if somebody was to ask me, like, what am I scared of? it might take me a while to think about, well, what am I scared of? Because I have experienced so much and I've survived through so much. And I guess I've conditioned myself to go, oh, yeah, I've been here before. I don't have to be scared about it. This will pass. So I guess a story that I can say is there used to be this Kurt Hahn. He was a very famous captain in the Navy, and they were all out at war at one point, and he was always trying to find the very best soldiers and people that would go and fight at war. And so he was taking these people that, he was really trying to get men that were like at their peak and prime, 22 years old, 24 years old, 25 years old. But then the leftovers were like people that were like 50 and 60 years old. They weren't going to be like great warriors. Well, he was finding out that at war, a lot of these people that were dying or quitting were like 23, 24, 25. And these people that were fighting the same fight, 50 years old, 60 years old, that he thought weren't going to be as good, they were all surviving and getting through it. And what he found out is the people that were 50 years old, 60 years old, they had already lived a life of hardship. They'd gone through divorces, or they've seen death, or they themselves have been through battle, and they survived it. They knew that there was a light at the end of the tunnel to work through. When you're young, you just give up so fast because you think it's the hardest thing you've ever experienced. It is the hardest thing you've ever experienced in your life, but that's just the beginning of how hard life is. Life just continues to get hard, but you have to understand that life does get better. It does get better. It's just, and if we didn't experience hard times, like a bad breakup or depression or a financial stress, those things really are temporary. You just have to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. These times will pass. And if we never experience those low times, we would never really be able to cherish how great it is when things are really good. I think we could take life for granted, and then it just becomes mundane if everything is working. If you've gone through the hard things, you start to understand that just the little bird that I'm hearing outside it's just singing, and it's like a little gift. It's because you just start to appreciate things. And so I think that's one thing about fear. Like I said, it's not an answer, but I can just tell you a story
Yes.
about that.
That is so beautiful. Like, I absolutely love the message of that story, because I think especially as teenagers, like, we have not experienced, like you said, a lot in our lives. And so when you have a little challenge, a little stressor, it's like, oh my gosh, like, I need to stop. I don't like this feeling. It's unfamiliar. I don't like it. I don't want it anymore. But realizing that once you overcome this hurdle, the next one will be that much easier. And just remembering, like, I can overcome this. Others have overcome challenges and faced maybe similar fears, and you can do it, and this too shall pass is a really nice saying. Is like, this feeling will go away, this moment will go away, I can face this and come out stronger.
I love what you talked about, awareness. I think that oftentimes we're scared of some things, but we don't even really know why. And just taking a minute and starting to think about, why am I scared of this firstly? And kind of thinking, is this spider going to actually harm me, or am I just scared of it because I'm scared of it? Maybe I can learn more about it.
Or like, what, for instance, you're going into maybe even something not in nature, like a new class or a new social situation, and you're stressed about it, but asking yourself, why am I scared about it? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen that won't be temporary? Like, just kind of being aware.
Exactly.
So throughout your journeys, we've seen you meet and, like you said, stay with so many fascinating traditional indigenous groups and learned about their cultures. What has been one of your biggest takeaways from staying with these groups that you can use in your daily life? We just want to quickly say, check out our happiness wellness products designed by us for individuals of all ages to help you bring a small bit of happiness to your home with our tangible tips and tools. Check them out in the show notes.
Oh, well, I think a big thing is how you learn from other people. I see that we can all live in our own little bubble and just be comfortable because it's easy. And we listen to everybody that we were never bold enough to go meet people that were not like us. And I think the wonderful thing about traveling, if you can go travel and get off the beaten path, and really, like I I'm always such an advocate for people if they want to travel, like not just look at it as a vacation, but like, how are you going to give service? Like, can you go and maybe work on the Peace Corps? Or can you work on a farm somewhere abroad? Or can you go to school and go to school there and really live there and have to learn the language and be invited and make friends that are going to be lifelong friends? And I think the thing that I've experienced is I've lived with so many cultures around the world that have a different way that they raise families and a different ways that they get their food, and they're different than the Western society. And once you're armed with kind of seeing how other people look at life, the biggest challenge is trying to, for me, is how do I implement what I learned from these other people and bring that with me in my wonderful life in the United States, but really challenge the system and go, wow, what I thought was normal and good and functioning is really not the right way, because I've seen better ways done in like Norway or done in an indigenous community in Mexico. I think an example of that would be like I was living with the San Bushmen. They're out in Namibia, Southern Africa, and they're a tribe, African tribe. And I was living with them for about 2.5 weeks. And you're just every day you're listening to kids singing and dancing and giggling, and you look at how they're spending the whole day. It's usually the girls all get together, and if you think about it, a girl, if they grew up around family and kids, like a 4-year-old takes care of an infant throughout the day. I mean, you can send them to mom to get fed, and then the boys get together and they want to go and shoot things and get in trouble and do all that. So it's like these different, and I would just see that all the girls get together and they take care of each other. They're singing these amazing songs, playing these cool games, hanging out with their mothers. And it's like there is no babysitter. They're just all taking care of each other. And instead, the women, when they have to do things like they really enjoy being around the house, taking care of infants, but preparing meals, but they actually like it because they're all hanging out together. There's no loneliness. The boys are all raising themselves, preparing to be maybe hunters when they get older. But the thing is, they were always taking care of each other. Whereas in the United States, at least, and I think so much of Canada, we think, okay, we're going to get partnered up, we're going to raise kids. And a lot of times we move away from our family support, taking care of a kid or two kids are working from like 9 to 5. So the stress of kind of raising kids alone without family support and having their friends hang out with them all day and trying to figure out how to afford childcare or send them to school like that. And I just kind of saw that there was no loneliness. Nobody's cooking dinner alone. Everybody's preparing dinner together, which is they're laughing and having jokes, and there's this community. And I think another thing that I learned about is like, that's how I want to live. Like, I know that in the United States, it's so easy for us to be alone in our world. Like, we're cooking dinner alone. We had to go to school and be shipped clear across the country to another school away from our families. And I think the way that to live with a tribe and be more concerned about other people rather than ourselves and be working for their happiness is something that's makes life so much more important than what we've kind of been trained as Westerners to just take care of ourselves and be this like lone wolf. So oftentimes, like, the woman that is an independent woman and makes tons of money and is career oriented, we're giving them tons of respect. But after a while, they've been having to do so much stuff alone and fighting against the world to be this strong woman. It's like recipe for being that much more lonely. And I see it for men too, men trying to be independent and the lone wolf and all that sort of stuff. And we think that that's what makes us important or gives us respect, but it's not. I think we all suffer from depression a lot, especially in the modern world when we're thinking about in the United States, Canada, and these more quote unquote sophisticated societies, modern day societies. We have the highest percentage of depression, antidepressants, drug use. Those are all effects and coping mechanisms of essentially loneliness. It's like you can go and when you start traveling and you realize how happy people are, but they don't have the things we have, material things. They don't have fancy cars, fancy houses. Money is not nearly as huge of an issue for survival as it is here. So since we're so lonely, it is kind of like, what is fulfilling to us? And when you're in a tribe and you're with these people that they don't have anything, they're laughing, they're always happy, they're laughing throughout the day, smiling. It's because they grew up knowing that it's more important that everybody else around them is happy rather than themselves. And that's what makes them happy. And I think that's something that we really have to challenge today, because every day in the United States and then Canada, it's getting worse. Like money is more important and all these sort of things. And it's not the right direction. It's not the key to happiness. The key to happiness is what you can give to other people.
Absolutely.
I love that so much.
Yes, because you're right. Social connection is proven to helping us feel happy, and helping others is proven to helping us feel happy.
But also having that mentality of, I'm not here to just make myself happy. I'm going to look out for others. I'm going to take care of my friends.
And in the end, that will make you happy.
Exactly, because if everybody is looking out for others, everybody has each other's best interest, it's so easy to be happy because they also have that exact same mentality as you, and you can trust them. You know that they're on your team.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's so fascinating how when you go to different parts of the world where we might look at them and say, how can they be happy living in a less developed society or living in a place where,
and having that open mind.
Where you don't have everybody living on their own or traveling around the country to go to college or anything like that. But it's really that, like, connecting, even if you don't live with your whole family, but like going out of your way to help people, going out of your way to make plans to spend time with people, or calling your family, or just putting in that effort and that intention to help others and be there for people that you care about and love. Because I 100% agree, and I think that's something that a lot of us might be feeling, loneliness. And when you're a teen, it's hard to feel like everyone gets what you're going through. You can feel really alone, but connecting with others, connecting with your friends, checking in with how they're doing and how they're feeling is such an important way to help ourselves feel like we have a purpose and like we have something to contribute.
For sure. And I mean, you have been on so many incredible trips around the world, but what would you say is your most memorable trip?
To not be boring, I have to have specific stories, but they're all so amazing. If a lot of people say, well, what's your favorite place? That's crazy, because one place has a sort of a culture that I really like, whereas another place has this landscape that's just spectacular. And another place has the awesomest animals, but it'd be a hard place to live. And so they all have very different stories, memorable. If you give me, I always say, if people want to hear stories, they have to give me specifics, and then it just inspires me to tell a story.
What would you say would be your favorite place, like, for if you could just go out and like film a season or an episode of Primal Survivor in any like environment to survive in? Which place? Like, not necessarily to live long term, but like just to have like a survival episode in. Which would you pick?
I really, really love Mexico. Believe it or not, even though they're kind of our neighbors, it's so underappreciated. The culture there about being family oriented and the happiness that's there. And it has an incredible diversity in landscapes if you go into Mexico. But the same thing in Latin America, when you talk about Central America and South America. Now that I can speak the language, I kind of understand the culture so much more, which I want everybody to learn a few languages, because it's another way of looking at the world, it's like living more lives, the more languages that you know. I really like it's much more community oriented in Latin America, but then also they have access, you start to get into the more tropical areas again. To where my heart really digs is getting into awesome biodiversity. You've got great wildlife and things like that. But so oftentimes I spent I think one of my last episodes was crossing the Andes, and I was down in Argentina, and I was living with families. And every time I was living with a family, the family might want to treat us, and let's have a really, really amazing dinner. Let's cook a dinner, and it's like, yeah, sweet, let's do it. And then all of a sudden, the neighbor comes over, and they just start taking the plates out of the cabinet and start cooking the chicken. All of a sudden, they don't even ask, and then pretty soon it's a big party with the whole neighborhood, and the neighborhood is like a big family, even though nobody's related. And that's the way it is every night. Whereas in the United States, it's like, do you even like your neighbors? Like, you don't want them over there. But that's learned. We learn to not like our neighbors. But if you go to other places, people go, yeah, they're not like me. My neighbors are not like me, but they want to be friends with me. I want to be friends with them. And they are our ultimate tools. They will always come over and help me with whatever I need help with. And I actually enjoy going over there and helping them with whatever. That's a way of thinking that is not Canadian or American that often.
Yes, totally. I 100% agree. And I love how, it's all about accepting others, even if they're not 100% like us, like
Exactly.
our neighbors, but just accepting them and learning from them. Even if like someone lives right next to us, they might be of a different culture or ethnicity, and there's so much to learn from those around us.
For sure. And Mexico is so incredibly beautiful. And like you said, there is so much amazing biodiversity.
Yeah, you just have to go to the places that aren't touristy. Like there's so many places that are off the road and off the beaten track and incredible. There are places in Mexico, you can go up into the mountains, into the highlands, and there's more pine tree diversity than anywhere else in the world. It looks like British Columbia, but it's in Mexico, yeah, I love it there.
Wow,
crazy.
because you wouldn't think of Mexico like anything like Canada. That's
It's
so
crazy
cool.
how like certain landscapes in like even just one country can be so extreme and different, and all you have to do is just go out there and find it.
So I have a question. This is a little bit different from what we've been talking about, but you were talking about how being on TV and being a nature host would be one of your dream jobs. And I think a lot of teenagers are interested in pursuing, TV careers or aspire to have their own show or something like that someday. So what advice would you share with a teen if they wanted to get started in the TV industry?
I think the biggest thing is now things are changing so fast, and I don't want to give advice as far as trying to be predominant on social media, but it does seem to be an avenue. But it's kind of like if you're doing what everybody else is doing, it's hard to stand out. I think, like, for example, if like what you guys are doing, if that's what you want to be doing, like, look at how hard you guys are working. You guys are working hard, putting yourself in a position of like influencing people more than just like putting on yoga pants and then getting on TikTok and doing weird dances and stuff. It's like you guys are doing something that not very many other people, and it shows how hard you guys work. And the harder, it's like somebody said, luck comes to those people who are prepared for it. Right? Like you have to be ready for luck. Luck happens to people that are already working and positioning themselves to be lucky. So going out there and doing podcasts and working really hard at that, doing internships and being involved, just like if somebody shuts the door on it, you put your foot in the door, clog the door and say, no, I want to work here somehow. How can I be involved? And you show up after school and you start working for like the news crew, and you start whatever it is, if it's like scrubbing floors or something like that, but you're in the presence. And like I always tell people, if they want to be a biologist, go volunteer your time at the local wildlife sanctuary, or a lot of times there's places where there's they take care of injured wildlife, like injured eagles and stuff like that. And you go there and you just volunteer your time. Especially when you're young, you can afford to not make money for a while. But the thing is that by the time you're asked for a resume or an application in college, and you have this life experience that nobody else has, where you were essentially, you showed that you have this drive, and you positioned yourself that, I worked at this news crew and I did this, or I internship with this. I did an internship with this photographer, and now I got a scholarship being a professional photographer because I worked with this amazing guy. Like, do that, and I don't think you should ever expect to do it all on your own. You want to work with other people, good people, and I think one of the biggest things for success is surround yourself with successful people. Surround yourself with the people that you want to be like, because there's a lot of people that will do the exact opposite for your life.
Absolutely, and especially when you're a teenager, I feel like it's so easy to get caught up with, the popular crowd or anything like that, but really, like, who do you want to be? And maybe a little bit more long-term, because, I mean, maybe you want to be popular right now, but in 5 years when you've graduated high school, who do you want to be? What do you want to be studying? Like, what are you truly passionate and interested about? Like, that's the type of thing that we need to be pursuing, and, like, being relentless, I think, is really a big key aspect to success. Like you said, like, how can I work here? How can I do this? Is there anything I can do to help? Not being afraid to pick up the phone and call somebody or email somebody that you're that you aspire to be
and
like.
And honestly, most of the time, people are really happy to help. Like, they are super excited
just
to see
like
that
how we've been
else.
fortunate enough to like be speaking with you today. Like, that's something that we never could have imagined, that we get to speak with somebody that we look up to. And I mean, we spoke to recently an author, a New York Times bestselling author, and she said the exact same thing. Luck comes to those who are prepared for it. If you aren't doing your due diligence and you aren't putting in time and effort and energy to speak with somebody or work towards something, you can't have that good luck come just to you.
And like, opportunities come to those who are looking. Like, if you're not looking and you're just waiting for it to fall into your hands, it's not going to come, because you need to be like looking everywhere, because you never know what might come or what you might see. And I think that just keeping your eye out for those opportunities, and always thinking about what you want to get, and just constantly, like Mercedes said, being relentless. And throughout your website, we see your quote, "The more you know, the less you need," which I love. But tell us more about this quote and what this means to you.
With knowledge, you can be so incredibly resourceful. And again, the things that, when I say I challenge what is common thought around me, I challenge these things that are all these people and things that are trying to make me scared. We live in a very consumer-oriented society, where we're trained to get a job so we can buy things mindlessly, so we can just be like consumer zombies. And I see so often, like, hunters, they go to Cabela's or Big Bass Pro Shop or something, and they think if they want to get into hunting, they got to get an ATV, and they got to get this, and they got to get that, and they got that. Or a big thing, if you see my shows, like, I'm just in, you can call me a slave to fashion, but I have like a tore up t-shirt. There's no brands on it. I'm wearing like 90s cargo shorts, and that's it. And I don't have shoes. I don't have anything else, because so oftentimes I see these kids that they want to get into hiking, or they want to go into being outdoors, and they're being seduced to thinking that they need to spend $450 on a tent before they even step outside. They gotta have a $200 pair of hiking shoes before they get on a trail. And if anything, I have a $3 pair of flip-flops, like $3 right here. Travel across the Andes in these things. Again, I don't need anything. The whole thing is, I know how to find my food. I know my body well enough to know that I don't need all these sort of things. I've trained my body to not have to have all these luxuries. And it's a luxury just to not have to carry it. So you learn how to make a fire. You learn how to find your food. You don't have to carry it with you. And that was a big thing with me. Like, a lot of people think I wanted to learn outdoor survival. No, I just wanted to know the skills to keep me comfortable, so I could go deeper out into the forest, so I can go longer into the forest and just stay there. So that you can't bring enough supplies to stay in the jungle for 8 months. You just can't. You have to know how to stay there from what nature can provide. And that's kind of what our lives are about. Our lives are about learning, and learn to make more with less. The more crap you have, that's not going to make you happy. No way, Jose.
I love that so much. Having that knowledge, that can just really power you through anything, really. Just knowing, I know that, for example, I don't need to have super fancy clothes, or I don't need to have something specific because I know these clothes look good on me. I feel comfortable in them. You don't need to be going out of your way to buying new hiking supplies every time you want to go. And less is more, and it doesn't own you. You are your own person, and things that you own, they don't make who you are because you are your own person.
Yes. So if you could go back and speak with your teenage self, what's one piece of advice that you wish you could give your teenage self?
I think the biggest thing, just because how I grew up, I was always under pressure of being made fun of, like not fitting in. And there came a point where it's like God gave me other talents, not like theirs. And we're all born with gifts. And our gifts are what we can follow. It's like we follow our heart. We follow, like, somebody has a passion for music. Go with it. Listen to that. Keep doing it. It's not like you have to be a rock and roll star to make a living and that's what you're going to do, but pursue music, and the destination shouldn't be that you're going to be a rock and roll star, but what you learn about on that journey of music, are you're being with musicians your whole entire life. You're going to different shows. It starts to just give you direction and your social group of people that love what you love. And for me, it was nature. Some people it's automobiles, some people it's athletics, some people it's music, some people it's art, but you got to find that passion and take a good hard look. Make sure that passion is healthy and sustainable. Nowadays, we can get seduced into thinking that our passion is things that our society wants to addict us to, like video games, a lot of video games, and social media is huge. And social media is taking us away from our passions. Because, like, what I'm seeing right now is we can admire all these fantastic artists, like drawing, like people that draw and love to draw, but we're spending our time looking at people that are drawing rather than us drawing ourselves, because we're being like drawn, addicted to things that aren't allowing us to practice the guitar and practice this independence that requires like drawing and athletics and things like that. Instead, we're like watching people do athletics, and that's something that is new, and it's really changing our society. So we're going to be finding people with lots of passions, but they don't have anything to stand by because they haven't been practicing them really. They've just been exposed to the passion. So that's something that I don't have an answer for. It's just, these are just things that I see.
Yes. No, I agree. Like, we're like, oh, I'm interested in that. And I love watching people like do cool skateboard tricks on TikTok. Exactly. Or I love watching people cook these incredible meals or do these things. And I'm so passionate about it. But instead of doing and practicing, pursuing your passion.
You're passionate about watching someone do something you think you're passionate about.
Well, it's like you think you're passionate about it, but you
haven't actually tried.
You're not actually doing it, and you should pursue your passion rather than just think about your passion.
Exactly.
And so I really love that, and I think that's a great piece of advice. Like, just follow your passion and go towards and be with the people who support and who share that with you, rather than feeling sad.
And again, like surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded, because it's so hard to, like, let's say you're interested in art, and following that passion in art, if you're surrounded by people who, they like art, but maybe they're a bit more into sports, and almost finding your own tribe in that kind of manner. And on top of that, you talked a lot about how, as you kind of go through more things, you start to see the beauty in things like watching the birds sing in the morning. But what brings you a small bit of happiness every day and that little bit of beauty?
I think a lot of it for me is nature. And that is one thing that a lot of people ask me, like, why am I so excited about nature? Why is it? And the way I think of it is kind of like how I told you how I grew up. I just loved bugs. I think we all, when we were kids, loved bugs. We loved to see them, but if our parents told us that they were yucky or gross, then that's how we formed an idea about how the world works. But we as humans have grown up, evolved with nature. Humans have been walking the planet for close to 500,000 years in humanids. So, like, even before that, Neanderthals, Homo erectus, all that sort of stuff, millions of years, we have developed a relationship and understanding of nature, because that was nature is our grocery store, our pharmacy, our hardware store, our everything. And so it's in our DNA as animals to understand nature better than anything else out there. That's what humans do. And so I think you've heard me say the more you know, the less you need, but also we only care about what we know about. And in our society now, we're not being influenced by nature nearly as much. We go into our air conditioned house. If you live in a very, very hot climate, Arizona, people go into their air conditioned house, into their air conditioned garage, into their air conditioned car. They drive their air conditioned car to their air conditioned office, and then they go back and do the same thing. They don't go outside and do that, be outside. And we're doing that in cars. We're doing all that sort of stuff. But once you start to, like, I got really interested in nature, especially with aquariums, because I kind of went down the rabbit hole of learning about every single fish and how to keep them alive and what they do and what they eat and what kind of music they like to listen to and all that sort of stuff. But it's like we all have that ability to love nature. So oftentimes we can live our entire lives super naively and go, yeah, the world has two kinds of trees, pine trees and maple trees. But if we had exposure and somebody to teach us that one tree, there's a name for that tree. That's an aspen tree, and that's a cottonwood tree, and that's a tamarack tree. And you start to know a handful of names, and you start to see around like, wow, I didn't know that there were that many tamarack trees or larch trees. Now I see larch trees everywhere. And then you start to know not only a handful of trees, but you can go and look at every single tree in your city and town and on your way to work and on your way to school, and you know the name of every single tree. You start to really care about not just all the different trees, but each individual tree, because they start to kind of become your friends. I know it sounds weird, but like on your way to school, you see that tree and you're like, I know that tree. That is, that's that amazing beech tree is like one of my favorite trees I've ever seen. And I look at it every day on my way to work, and you start to see it when it buds out. You start to see it when its leaves are unfolding. You start to see it when it's in flower. You start to see it when the leaves are changing colors, and you watch it every day. It's like your friend on your way to work. It sounds crazy, but all of us, that is a part of our mind that is awaiting to be awakened. And pretty soon it's so easy to find out about not just the song of the bird, the bird song. You start to know that song is a black-capped chickadee. I know what black-capped chickadees look like, and pretty soon you realize that there's 3 black-capped chickadees that live in your yard, and they're the same bird, and they start to become your friends. And so often we can just be out with their blinders and not even care and not even acknowledge that there's birds singing and there's life out there. But for me, nature is this lifetime upon lifetime upon lifetimes of things to learn about and more things to care about. And it starts to become, a weed is not just a weed. You know what it is. You know what it's used for. You know that it has medicinal value, and every single plant in the world is like that. And so for me, it's just, again, we all can have a better relationship with nature. And if we did that and knew that they're our friends, we would be taking care of them.
I love that so
Totally.
much.
And I mean, we have found a lot of research about happiness, and spending time outside, spending time in nature, spending time looking at trees or flowers or whatever is proven to bring us happiness. It like triggers the serotonin inside of our brain. Like it literally makes you happier. And so I think that having that constant of, the weather outside might change, your friends, your relationships, you change, but that tree is always there, or those animals come back year after year. Like we have this one nest of robins, and they have their kids, and then they come back year after year to this same nest in our yard, and it's just such a beautiful constant because you see them every spring. There's always going to be robins flying around the backyard and the patio, and it's just it's such a beautiful reminder.
And I remember when I was younger, by like a playground near our house, there was like a bunch of like trees, and there was this one tree I remember I used to always love because you could like swing on it. And then apparently at one point they put like a notice on it. They're like, this tree is gonna get chopped down. And I
think it had like a disease or something.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I started crying. And then my dad sent like a notice to the city. He was like, don't cut the tree down. But
yeah,
they unfortunately cut it down.
Yeah, but it's just so beautiful, the constant, like the consistency of nature, and how that can almost feel like a friend. Exactly, like it's always there. So do you have anything exciting coming up that you'd like to share with us? Maybe any shows or events, etc., that you have coming up in the future?
Well, I will say there's some pretty exciting stuff coming up. I can't tell you everything. Stuff's pretty top secret, but I'll be going to Africa a bunch this year. Going to Asia, hopefully South America. So there's more television stuff. There's more adventures. A really cool thing is I just got back from Mozambique, Africa, and I was working on a tree planting organization. They do a bunch of reforestation in Africa, Southeast Asia, and a little bit in South America. And so that's been a really cool organization to work with. They're called Eden Reforestation Project. You can look that up. But again, it's like you find these different organizations and you're like, wow, when I graduate or this summer, I want to work with them. I want to volunteer. There's all these people doing these cool things and you can invest your time and then that's just going to be opportunities later on. But that was a thing that happened with me. I went, volunteered my time. I thought, man, whatever you guys are doing, I want to be a part of it. I don't know what or how, but you guys are doing cool stuff. And so we started to do that. They sent me down free down to Mozambique. I got to see their project and now we're working out ways that I can work with them. So again, I want to live my life taking care of what I love. And so that's nature. So if I can be involved with reforestation projects and protection of endangered species and also education, like getting people to understand where I'm coming from, like getting them to actually love what I love. That's kind of like maybe the reason why I'm put on this earth.
Oh, I love that so much.
That is so amazing.
And we are very excited for the upcoming
make
television.
Sure to stay tuned.
Yes, we understand it's top secret, but we are very excited to see what's to come. And the reforestation organization sounds so important, and I can't wait to learn more about that as well. And where can our audience find you if they want to keep up and learn more?
I think one of the best things is follow my Instagram. I love that. I make all kinds of friends on that thing. So my Instagram is my name. So Hazen Audel, Hazen Audel. There I am. I have a Patreon page. You can see that in the bio. That's where I'm forming a community of people from all over the world that are really interested in like rewilding, gardening, having a relationship with nature, keeping up with my travels. That's another good thing. My Facebook, I need to be better at that, but definitely my Instagram. So I hope to be making more friends on that thing.
That's perfect. We will link that in the show notes so that anyone who wants to check it out can really easily check out your Instagram. And we just want to say thank you so much for joining us here today.
Absolutely amazing.
You guys are rad. Thank you. That was super fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness.
And thank you so much to Hazen for joining us today. It was so incredibly inspiring to talk with him. I mean, we are massive fans of Primal Survivor and of all of his shows. We've been watching them for years. And he's just so smart, so ambitious, and so deep, and just inspiring. His connection to nature and the importance of social connection is just so deep and wonderful to hear and listen to. Anastasia, what's your biggest takeaway of today?
I think my biggest takeaway was that social connection is so incredibly important. I mean, Hazen just stressed how important it is and how all of those amazing tribes that he visited, and what he learned most was that they had such an amazing social dynamic, and that the key to happiness is just not feeling lonely and having those strong connections with family or friends or even your neighbors,
and actively putting in effort to connect with them,
and caring more about the other person than yourself, because if the other person is doing the same way for you, it's just the best way to have a happy and amazing relationship dynamic. What about you, Mercedes?
For me, one of my biggest takeaways from Hazen was regarding facing fears. We have a lot of fears fears instilled into us. So when you feel fear, whether it's about something new or about going into a new social situation, doing something that you've been dreading, seeing someone that you don't love to see, or anything, maybe even if it's seeing a snake or a bug or a wasp like me, just questioning the fear and asking yourself genuinely, why am I afraid of this? Like, why do I have a reason to be? Will this still be something that I'm worried about after I overcome it? Like, why am I scared of this? And using that as a weapon to face and overcome that fear.
If you enjoyed this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, please leave us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening. It really helps us out and we really appreciate it.
Also, be sure to join our happiness family. It's entirely free. We'd love to have you. And you can do that by following this podcast on whichever podcast listening platform you are on now. See you next time!